Hello everyone and welcome to Rollin'-ish. I'm Matt, and in this video we're going to discuss all the abilities you get when you play the Sorcerer class. Now it's important to know that among the magic users in the D&D world, the Sorcerer is the class that has their magic ability innately, meaning they were born with it. Whether it's in their bloodline or whether it occurred to them through a sense of some wild occurrence, it is in their very being that they can use this magic. Unlike the wizard who has to study in order to use magic, or a cleric, a paladin, a warlock that get their magic from some kind of deity or patron. The Sorcerer is unique because magic comes from within. And your player's handbook does a really great job at explaining this and describing what it looks like when your Sorcerer is conjuring their magic abilities. Your player's handbook is going to suggest that you focus on charisma as your primary ability score. This is because your magic is fueled by your charisma. Any attack roll, any saving throw for your spell save DC, that is all generated from your charisma, and thus it is why it's recommended that you make that your primary ability. Next, your book focuses on choosing something like Constitution so you can stay on the battlefield longer. This is because the Sorcerer has a D6 for their hit dice. This is not very high. This is baseline. In fact, anytime you short rest or level up, it's the D6 that you're rolling to get back hit points or increase in hit points as you level. This is not a lot of health. Even through 20 levels, even if you rolled a 6 through all 20 levels, you're only talking about a maximum of 120 hit points through 20 levels. That is not very high. So, and I know you have to add your Constitution to that, but still, it is not very high, and it's why magic users are squishy, because of their low hit dice. The proficiencies that sorcerers get are going to be no armor whatsoever. So it's going to make spells like mage armor important to use, or using shield to block an incoming attack because you can't wear armor. You are very limited in the weapons that you have access to because your primary method of defending yourself or attacking is going to be your magic. You are strictly a magic user, so you only have proficiency in daggers, darts, slings, quarterstaffs, or light crossbows when it comes to weapons. You get no tool proficiencies, and the saving throws that you're proficient in are going to be Constitution and Charisma. As far as skills, you get to choose between 2 from Arcana, Deception, Insight, Intimidation, Persuasion, and Religion. This is leaning a little heavy towards your charisma, being as though Deception, Intimidation, and Persuasion are all there. But you get to choose 2 out of those 6 options. So, when it comes to equipment, all sorcerers start with a light crossbow and 20 bolts, or any simple weapon, which would be a dagger, dart, sling, or quarterstaff. You get a component pouch if you are going to be using the component rule or arcane focus. The difference between this is all in your gameplay. Talk to your dungeon master because all spells have some kind of components to it, whether it's a combination of verbal, so there's an incantation you have to say, maybe somatic, those are hand movements that you'd have to do, or body movements that you'd have to do to help conjure the spell as part of the process, and material components. So if you're going to use material components in order to cast spells in your campaign, That means shopping to you as a magic user is going to be very important because some spells are going to have components that you need to get through. Like maybe it's some dust, maybe it's a twig of a certain tree, maybe it's a piece of gold, maybe it's a pearl. These are things that you could get in a magic component shop, and it's going to make it very hard for you because you'll only have a certain amount of those components, and each time you cast the spell you consume those things. So this is going to be for those really in-depth players at the table who want to track things like how many arrows and bolts they have, how many components they have. That component pouch is going to be important. If you're not going to keep track of all that stuff and you don't want to use the component system, then you're going to have an arcane focus. This is just an object from which your spells come out of instead of consuming the material components. You still might have to hold to the rule of I need a magical hand gesture, right? A somatic component or a verbal component, but maybe you're not burning through material components. So an arcane focus might be your quarterstaff. Maybe you're a sorcerer who has a staff and you cast your spells from it. Maybe it's a wand. Maybe it's a twig from an ancient tree. You can come up with what that is. That is where your magic comes from. You get a Dungeoneers pack or Explorers pack. Again, those aren't really too difficult. It's mainly backpack, bedroll, rations, maybe some torches, maybe some rope, things like that. And you get 2 daggers. So if you are in melee range, when you cast a spell and you've got an enemy within 5 feet of you, typically, depending on how your dungeon master is playing, you either can't cast the spell or you have to do so at disadvantage because somebody's right there next to you and they can try and distract you, right? So maybe you don't cast the spell on that target that's right next to you. You pull out your dagger and stab them. And maybe you try and get some distance that way. So you get 2 daggers. Now, this is where you get your magic right at first level. We're going to get into what all sorcerers get now. And spell casting is first. At first level, you get access to your magic. And looking at this table, you've got your proficiency bonuses. Then you've got something called sorcery points. We're going to talk about that as part of your meta magic. But when you look at the table, it shows you how many cantrips you know, levels 1 through 20. So starting with 4, at level 20, you have 6. And then first level, second level, all the way to 9th level spells, how many spell slots you get at each level. So you can see at 3rd level, you get access to 2nd level spells. At 5th, you get access to 3rd level spells. At 7th, so at all the odd numbers, you get new spell levels. And as each time you level up, you're gaining some sort of, spell slots to use. So you've got a lot of spell slots all the way through 20th level that you can use, all the way up to 9th. You've got 1 9th level spell slot starting at level 17. All right. At the end, you can use a 9th, an 8th, 2 6 and 7s, 3 2 through 5s, and 4 1s. So those are all the spell slots that you can use, and your table's going to show you that. But essentially, this is where you start. You pick your cantrips. Those are your 0 level spells. Those are the ones you can do at will, and you don't have to count them. Once you get into leveled spells, like 1st level spells, 2nd level spells, that's when you have something called spell slots, and you can only use so many of them. You can't just cast all your spells at will. You can only cast 1st level spells with your 1st level spell slots, and if you have 2 or 3, that's it. Once you cast 2 or 3 spells, you're done, right? As you level up, you can use more spells, you can do more things, higher level spells. The way spell casting works too is low level spells can be cast up, meaning if you take a 1st level spell and you cast it at 3rd level, usually it includes more damage or more targets for the area of effect, things like that. You can cast up, you cannot cast down. So if you've only got 1 4th level spell slot and you've already used it, You can't cast a 4th level spell at 1st level. It doesn't work that way. You can cast up, you can't cast down. And you can only cast the amount of spell slots you have for that level. Okay, you have to count these things and track them. Okay, those are the difference in your spell casting. Some spells are attack spells, so you would be adding your spell attack modifier that'll be on your character sheet. It's driven by your proficiency bonus plus your charisma modifier. That's why your handbook is saying the higher your charisma modifier, the better, because you'll be more likely to hit your attacks. If you're casting an area of effect or some kind of effect-based spell, it's not an attack roll on your part. It's your target's saving throw. And the difficulty class they have to meet or beat is going to be 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your charisma modifier. So again, that's why your handbook is telling you to make your charisma your highest ability score, because all of your spell casting, your attacks, and your saving throws are all built off of that. Okay. Next, at 2nd level, you get what's called Font of Magic. Well, before we get into that, Sorcerer Origin actually starts at 1st level. This is actually your subclass. So we'll get into subclasses in our next video, but your player's handbook gives you 2 options: Draconic Bloodline, like you're innately born with it, or Wild Magic. Nature chose you and you were born with your magic abilities, but certain things happen because you have a slighter lack of control over this magic. So certain things randomly may happen when you use your magic, which makes it very cool and exciting. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. You get that at 1st level. Our next video will tackle what you get with Draconic Bloodline or Wild Magic. But at 2nd level, you get something called Font of Magic, and this is sorcery points. So sorcery points are a different point system that allow you different abilities based on the abilities that you choose, like meta magic. So you can spend sorcery points to have your spells do different things. Sometimes you can twin a spell, so instead of it targeting 1, it could target 2 creatures. You can turn a bonus action into a 2nd spell, which is good because all the other classes like Warlock, Wizard, they can only cast 1 spell. They don't get extra attack. If they cast a bonus action spell, then their action can only be a cantrip or a melee attack. Because some spells are actually using a bonus action to cast them, not an action. So you would think, oh, well, I cast this bonus action spell, and then on my action, I cast another spell. It doesn't work that way for warlocks and wizards. If they've got a bonus action spell and they cast it, their action can only be a cantrip spell or a melee attack. It can't be a leveled spell, right? For you, the sorcerer, it's different. You can use a bonus action to spend sorcery points on something called Quicken Spell, which is an option that allows you to cast a 2nd spell, making the sorcerer, in my opinion, slightly stronger than the wizard when this is used that way. And we're going to get into those options in a moment, but that's your sorcery point system. Get a certain amount of points and you can spend them on extra, like, special moves. Flexible casting, you can spend sorcery points to gain additional spell slots. So I'm going to spend 2 sorcery points to get, a 1st level spell back. And this is what that table says. And it works both ways. You can burn a 1st level spell slot to get 2 sorcery points, or you could spend 2 sorcery points to get back an expended 1st level spell slot. And it goes both ways: a 2nd level spell slot or 3 sorcery points, a 3rd level spell slot or 5 sorcery points, 4th level spell slot or 6, 5th level spell slot or 7 sorcery points. You can convert them, okay? And it's a bonus action to do so. So if you're out of spell slots but you have sorcery points, maybe you take your sorcery points, convert them into a spell slot as a bonus action, and then take your action to cast that spell, all in the same turn. Very cool. That's how sorcery points work. At 3rd level, you get access to something called meta magic. You get 2 of them right here at 3rd level. You get another one at 10th and another one at 17th for a total of 4. And you have many options. So let's talk through them, because you're going to choose 2 of these at 3rd level when you get your mana magic. Careful spell is something you can spend 1 sorcery point, and you can choose a number of creatures that up to your charisma modifier to automatically succeed a saving throw if they're in an area of effect for a spell that you're casting. So, for example, Fireball is a 3rd level spell. It creates like a 20-foot radius. Now, if you want to cast that to get enemies, but you've got friends in your party in that radius, they're going to take some damage. Careful spell allows you to burn a sorcery point to make sure that those teammates automatically succeed on that saving throw. So at worst, they take half the damage. Okay. The amount of people or friends that you can do that for is going to be equal to your charisma modifier. So if your charisma modifier is a 4 and you've got 5 friends in your radius, you can only protect 4 of them, right? Another reason why you want to get your charisma modifier, your charisma score as high as possible, because it helps something like Careful Spell. Okay, so Careful Spell will allow you to use those cool spells even with friends in the way, but you can choose a number of them to automatically succeed the saving throw, so they can only take half the damage. That's what Careful Spell is. Distant Spell is an option. If you cast a spell that has a range of 5 feet or more, you can spend a sorcery point to double the range. So, for example, if a spell has a range of 30 feet and you've got enemies beyond 30 feet you want it to hit, you can spend a sorcery point to make the range on that spell 60 feet instead of 30, and now you can reach them without having to use your movement. An alternative use of distant spell is if you've got a spell that the range is touch, you can extend it 30 feet so you don't have to move up to your target to touch them. And that's cool because you do not have armor. You are weak. You do not want to be on the front lines. You want to be in the back. So the fact that you want to use this spell that requires you to touch them means you got to move into the fray and be close enough to touch them. Now you're in striking distance. And if you want to get away, they're going to get an opportunity attack. And distant spell is good for you because it'll take that touch spell and turn it into a range of 30 feet, so you could still stay in the back and go, you. And do it that way. Okay, that's distant spell. Super useful. Empowered spell means that when you roll damage for a spell, you can spend a sorcery point to re-roll a number of the damage dice up to your charisma modifier, a minimum of 1. So let's say your damage requires you to roll 5d8 and your charisma modifier is a 4, right? Let's say you roll that damage and you roll a bunch of 1s and 2s. You can, since your charisma modifier is a 4, you could grab up to 4 of those, burn a sorcery point on empowered spell, and re-roll 4 of those dice. I just turned a 1 into a 5. I turned a 2 into a 6 or an 8. You know what I mean? So it's a good way to, like, when those moments come and you use that big spell and you roll like crap, you can use empowered spell, spend a sorcery point, re-roll a number of damage dice that are up to your charisma modifier. Very cool. Extend spell. When you cast a spell that has a duration of a minute or longer, you can spend a sorcery point to double its duration to a maximum of 24 hours. So let's say it's a concentration spell and you have to maintain concentration for a minute. If you use extended spell, now it's 2 minutes. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but 6 seconds is a round. That's like 10 minutes. That's 10 rounds, I mean. This will make it 20 rounds. Now, I don't play it like that. I play a minute as 3 rounds. because my campaigns have heightened difficulty in combat. So I treat minutes a little bit differently. I know the rules lawyers out there are like, what? Too bad. And you're not playing, so it doesn't matter for you. But my players enjoy it. It heightens the danger. Extended spell is something that they would really want to consider in that case. Heightened spell is an option when you cast a spell that forces a creature to make a saving throw to resist its effects. You can spend 3 sorcery points to give that one target disadvantage on the first saving throw they make on that spell. So heightened spell is, heightening the danger. So, yep, it costs 3 sorcery points because it could be considered overpowered at lower levels, but to spend 3 sorcery points to impose disadvantage on a saving throw, you're really probably trying to kill something at that point, like fireball, and you don't want them to resist it. You want them to take the full damage. Heighten that spell. Spend the 3 sorcery points so they get disadvantage on that saving throw. Maximize your chances of them failing, right? So you could do the max damage. That's what that's for. Quicken spell is the one I was describing a little bit earlier. This is where you can spend 2 sorcery points to turn a bonus action, an action spell into a bonus action. This would mean, let's say you use your action to cast a spell, and then you're going to spend 2 sorcery points. So on your bonus action, you can use it as an action. So cast another spell. This is what makes it different between the sorcerer and the warlock, the cleric, the wizard. Because like I said earlier, if they cast a bonus action spell, they can only use a cantrip or a melee attack on their action. Or a ranged attack if they have like a bow and arrow, crossbow, something like that. They can't do this. This is one of the things that make the sorcerer stand apart, using that bonus action to cast another spell. It's still going to require a spell slot and consume the components necessary and all that, but it's just a way to cast 2 spells in a turn. Subtle spell. When you cast a spell and spend a sorcery point, you can cast it without any somatic or verbal components. This is important because especially if you're trying to be very quiet or sneaky or stealthily, you are making words. You are saying things when casting the spell. So if you're really trying to be quiet about it, maybe you spend a sorcery point on subtle spells so you can cast your spell without saying anything and thus not revealing your location or your party's location. That's going to be that's a stealth option for your spell. Think of yourself like a sniper in that way. And then lastly, you have twin spell. When you cast a spell that targets only one creature and doesn't have a range of self, so like it's got to have a range, that one target 30 feet away, whatever it is, right? You can spend a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level to target a second creature in range with the same spell. So 1 sorcery point if it's a cantrip. But if it's a 3rd level spell, you got to spend 3 sorcery points to twin that spell to hit a second target. That's cool. That's going to be really cool when you get to something like Ray of Frost or Chromatic Orb, right? That is a ice blast chromatic orb. You get to choose the element, and it's an orb of energy that hits a target. Those are specifically spells that target one. So twinning the spell to have like 2 of them go, it's awesome because you're getting more than one target. It's not going to work on things that already have multiple targets, like Magic Missile, you could target multiple people. Scorching Ray, you could target multiple people. Twin spell doesn't work for that because you're already targeting more than one person. This is going to be for those spells that specifically target one person. And you're like, oh man, I wish I could hit both these people. Twin spell allow you to do that. It's just going to cost you based on the level of spell that you're casting. Okay. All right, moving on. At 4th level, and again at 8th, 12th, 16th, and 19th, you get your ability score increase option. So if you haven't done so yet, max out that charisma. And once you do, focus on Constitution because that's going to impact your health. You're not going to have a lot of health as a spellcaster, so Constitution is going to be super important to get those up. If I were you, I would try to get those both to 20 before I even think about foregoing and taking a feat. And remember to speak to your dungeon master, because not every campaign is like that. But when you get to the ability score improvement, you can forego and choose a feat instead if your dungeon master allows that. But again, I would try and max out your charisma and your constitution before I even think about taking a feat or looking at other things. You don't need strength as a sorcerer. You're not wielding weapons. You know what I mean? So maybe you beef up something like constitution, maybe wisdom or dexterity. Maybe that's cool. Okay. And then lastly, at 20th level, you get a feature called Sorceress Restoration. At 20th level, you regain 4 sorcery points whenever you finish a short rest. Typically, your sorcery points are not going to regenerate until you've taken a long rest, but at 20th level, you can at least get 4 back when you take a short rest. That is what all sorcerers get. In our next video, we're going to focus on the Sorceress Origins. These are your subclasses that you actually pick at first level. They are known as the Draconic Bloodline and the Wild Magic Sorcerer. So come right back and check us out for that. Until then, keep rolling those dice, and we'll see you at the table.